on this mountain, if you see that area that I zoomed in on. So this part right there, that little divot, that's what we call Saddle Mountain. Because it looks like saddle. Because that's how we You know what? Shush. Now you see it? So, we have Saddle Mountain. So, I was on a beach trip, youth retreat, summer camp, right? And during these summer camps, we usually do some sort of hike. So we're told about this mountain called Saddle Mountain. We're told like, yeah, that's going to be our hike for this youth retreat. Because we're like, cool, all of us love hikes, just time to spend around our friends, hang out. So we're on the youth retreat, right? And we're going to Saddle Mountain. It's like a 30-minute drive in the first place. So we're like, okay. And during this 30-minute drive, they're like, okay, it's going to be like a 3-mile hike at max. 3 miles at max. So 5 kilometers? 5 kilometers, give or take, for the Germans. So we get there, and we're like, okay, 3 miles, little change in elevation, but that's not going to hurt anybody, right? Not that hard. So we get there, and we start, things are going good. And then it just starts ramping up. Like, the elevation just shoots up. It's going boom, boom, just all the way up. So we get there, and I get to the peak of that first mountain. You see that mountain on the right? That little hill? That little mound? So, thank you, Sister Marianne. So that little peak right there, as we get to that, and I'm like, okay, this is a great view. I love this view. And then I was told by the people I was walking with and people walking back that I've made it to the actual peak of the mountain, like, yeah, you still got some ways to go. It's almost there. So I'm like, there's more? And so start walking down. There's no cloud cover on this day. It's a hot day. It was like 90 degrees Fahrenheit, so 25 degrees Celsius, somewhere around there. So it's a pretty warm day. And so I'm drinking my water, as you do, climbing down. I'm like, okay, this is getting warm. It's hot. I was sweating. I get down to the bottom, and I look up, and I'm like, I still have to climb that. So start walking. And TJ, if you can flip to the other picture. So you walk for a little bit. Yeah, I found that one. Yeah. So that's... Wow, there's trees in Oregon? Who knew? So this is actually like not at the very bottom of where you reach to start going up. That's like halfway up from where the bottom is. So we get to this bottom, and that looks like a pretty like kind of like tough climb, right? Pretty steep, pretty going to good. Wow, going to good. English. Pretty steep, pretty kind of like challenging climb. So you start walking, and going up to this place it's all gravel, but they have like chains over the gravel so you can get grip on your shoes. So kind of sketchy, kind of not the safest, but still fun hike. So it was like, I was walking for like an hour right now. My feet were sore. I'm like, almost there. Keep going. And when I get up there, that's the only picture I have. I'm sorry, I couldn't find any pictures of what I wanted to talk about when I got up there. But when you get up there, they have guardrails so you can see all around you. But if you look out, you can see the rest of the mountain range. And you see the valley that's like on the other side of it. But then at the same time, you see the Pacific Ocean, and you can see the city that's there. It's called the city of Astoria. And it's a city that's kind of well known in Oregon. It's just an ocean city. But you can see Astoria, which you see the city. You see all the buildings, all the different buildings, the towers, because there's a spire there that's kind of just a landmark. And then you see the beach. You can see the sand. Like, you can see the whiteness and like the light color of the sand. And then you can physically see just a boundary of where the water goes. And it is one of the best views I've seen in my life. So, go back down, starting this trek back down. So I have to go down one mountain, into the valley again, and then up the mountain again, and then down again. I'm like, I'm not looking forward to this. I had like this much water left in my water bottle. Was not having it. Water? So, make it back down. And I was like, this whole entire time, I was like, 3 miles, my butt. That was not 3 miles. That's so much longer. Looked it up when I was writing this. Turns out it was like 4.5 miles or 7 kilometers. So they underestimated a tiny bit. Also had a 500-meter climb in elevation, or 1,600 feet for us Americans. So we were told, yeah, little elevation change, 3-mile hike, it'll be easy. No, that we were lied to. I don't think they knew what they were talking about. Plus, there were some sketchy, footbridges, literal pieces of just wood across the gap. Just a piece of wood, just across the gap. Fun time, though. It was a good time, but it was annoying. So, we get done. It takes, I think there's a group of about 100 of us, probably. Yeah, about twice as many people. And it took everybody. Some people left earlier. Some people left later because they were still eating lunch and everything. I think out of everybody, it took everybody to get up and come back down 3 hours or so. So it was like an all-day thing. So we get done with this, and I'm like, cool. That was a great hike. I hated being in that valley, though. I got to that valley, I was like, there's still more. And I look up, and I see that. And I'm like, wow, I have a lot ahead of me. It was worth it in the end, though, because of that view. That view of just that beautiful view of the ocean and everything around it. It is beautiful. And I wouldn't have been able to see that if I stopped at the first peak, right? If I stopped at the first peak, it was a beautiful view from the first peak. I could see the entire forest all around me, but I couldn't see the ocean from the first peak because I had to get to the second peak. The second peak was blocking the first peak from seeing the ocean. It's the same way in our walk with Christ. You'll get onto that first peak and it'll be like, wow, this is amazing. And then God will say, I got something bigger for you. And he points to the mountain right next to you, and it looks super tall, and you don't want to go. And so you're like, okay, this is all right. Start walking down into the valley, right? Get down to the bottom of the valley, and you look up, and it looks twice as high now, right? Because you had a higher elevation point, and you started walking down to start going back up. At that bottom point, you're going to not be able to see anything. It's going to look bigger, right? Just from perspective. So one of my youth pastors and my leader later on said something to me when I was out of the youth group, but he was still one of my leaders. He says, we get to the bottom of those mountains and we're scared of that journey back up. We find a cave and we sit in that cave because that cave's comfortable. The cave keeps us warm. It makes us feel secure because there's only one way in, one way out. We can't really be stopped. But God comes in and is like, hey, will you leave this cave if you trust me that there's something better at the top of this mountain? And it's our decision to say, yes, I trust you and continue up this journey, or to stop in that cave and just be like, no, I'm scared. I feel content here. So now for some biblical examples of this, because everything needs some biblical background. So, starting at Acts 9, we have, at this time, he isn't known as the Apostle Paul, but we have the Apostle Paul, right now known as Saul. Saul was persecuting Christians because that's what he thought was right in his eyes. He thought that this is the false Messiah, they are blaspheming God, they deserve death. So, he was in a city and he got permission from the high chiefs of the Jewish church to go out into Damascus and find Christians, lock them up, put them on trial, and kill them. So he gets his permission. Pretty high point, right? Getting permission from some of the strongest people in the culture at the time to go and do what you think is right. So he starts on this road, riding his horse, has some friends with him, and then he physically gets knocked on his butt. It says, then Saul, still breathing threats and murder against the disciples of the Lord, went to the high priest and asked for letters from him to the synagogues of Damascus, so if he found any who were on the way, whether men or women, he might bring them bound to Jerusalem. As he journeyed, he came near Damascus, and suddenly a light shone around him from heaven. Then he fell to the ground and heard a voice saying to him, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me?
And he said, "Who are you, Lord?" Then the Lord said, "I am Jesus whom you are persecuting. It is hard for you to kick against the goads." So he, trembling and astonished, said, "Lord, what do you want me to do?" Then the Lord said, "Arise and go into the city. You will be told what you must do there." Sounds like our journey, right? He was on a high mountaintop. Literally couldn't be touched by almost anybody. And then he physically gets put on his butt and told, "Go and wait in a room." How did you guys feel at that point? I'd feel pretty just, wow, I just got told to wait when I was feeling pretty high and mighty. So he's going in there and he's sitting, right? So his mountaintop, right? That first mountaintop, high and mighty, on top of the world. Knew some of the strongest people in the Jewish church, has permission from the Jewish church to go do what he thinks is right. And he's on that and he thinks he's good, right? And then the Lord comes, he's like, "I got a different plan for you," and knocks him down. And he finds his cave in that little room. And then Ananias comes, someone that was told by the Lord, "Go to this person," which is another story for a different sermon. And he gets healed. And he goes back up, gets healed, starts learning about Jesus as the one true Messiah, and starts spreading the word, gets thrown in jail, back down into the valley, comes back up, comes back down, and the cycle continues. But each time, it gets higher and higher. So, that's the first story I have for you. The second is in the Old Testament, in Genesis 39. So, this is about Joseph. He had, how many brothers did he have? Where is it? 12? Is it 12? Is it 11 or 12? 11. So 11, and then he got 12th later. Okay. So, he had 11 brothers. But Joseph was the favorite of his dad. 11 siblings. That's a lot of people, right? And to have the baby, the one that's kind of the last of the litter, be the favorite, kind of hurt them, right? You'd think, wow, why is he the favorite? I do all the work. I help out on the farm. I take care of the sheep. He kind of just sits there and reads. And so Joseph has some dreams, and those dreams come true, which just elevates his position with his father even more. His dad loves him at this point. So as a gift, his dad gives him a coat of many colors. If you want a good movie to watch for this story, watch Joseph in the Coat of Many Colors by DreamWorks. Great movie, great animation, great soundtrack. There's a movie recommendation for the day. Have fun. So, he's riding high, right? Favorite of his dad. New coat that looks pretty spiffy, right? And his brothers were just not having it. They weren't having it at all. So, what did they do? They kidnapped him. And then they framed it that he ran away. And then they sold him into slavery. Okay? So, mountaintop, right? Feeling pretty good. Dad's favorite, new coat, feeling spiffy, feeling like I'm on top of the world. And then I became a slave. All the way down. Right? Must have been demoralizing, humiliating, just awful in every sense. So, Joseph's sold by his brothers into slave. And so he's sold into slavery to these slave masters. They take him all the way from the land of Canaan, right? Yeah, Canaan. And he goes all the way to Egypt. Didn't find out how far that was, because that just came to mind. But it's a pretty long journey. And he had to walk all this way, tied up to the back of camels, with little food, little water, forcing him to walk this whole way. So he gets to Egypt, and he gets there, and he's sold as a slave, right? Nobody wants to be a slave. It's horrible. You're told what to do. You're treated unfairly. You're less than a human in those eyes. So Joseph is a slave now, right? And Joseph, even though he's in this position, decides, hey, I'm going to serve God and do this to my fullest. So he's working hard, and he catches the eye of the slave master. So the slave master comes to him and is like, I like you. Come with me in my house, and you can be basically the head of all the slaves. So Joseph now is getting to live in his slave master's house, which is unheard of for a slave, right? Getting an actual somewhat comfortable place to sleep instead of outside in a shack with a bunch of other people, right? So he gets some favor from his master, and then his master's wife tries to make a move on him. Joseph's like, I ain't having it. And then the wife frames Joseph for trying to make a move on him. So with this, slave master's like, I'm throwing you in jail. You're lucky I didn't kill you. So Joseph gets thrown in jail. He meets two other people. He meets a baker, and he makes a wine person for the Pharaoh. They were both thrown in jail. So they're all sitting in jail, getting their food. Life sucks at that point, right? Here's the head slave master, get to live in the house with his owner, right? Pretty good for being a slave if we're going to be honest. And then he's thrown in jail for something that isn't his fault. So he gets thrown in jail, and he's sitting there. And he's just talking with the other guys, and two of the other guys have dreams. And Joseph, being able to interpret these dreams, tells them what it means. And it turns out these interpretations come true. So he's sitting there and he tells these guys, hey, when you get out, remember me. Tell my master it isn't my fault. Tell Pharaoh that I can interpret dreams if it needs to happen. And so he sits there. He sits there for 3 years. And they forget to feed him during this time too. So he's surviving on literally bare bones of everything. They forgot to feed him, forgot to give him water. Literally barely surviving. And so the baker, I don't remember what the baker did. The baker ended up getting in trouble and getting killed. But the wine person for the Pharaoh got his job back because he was found to be innocent. So the wine taster is doing there, and he overhears while he's giving the Pharaoh wine one day that the Pharaoh's having some dreams that are troubling him. And so he's like, hey, I know a guy that could help. And so he goes, this guy Joseph that's in jail right now, he can help you. So Joseph gets out of jail and talks to Pharaoh. Pharaoh's like, whoa, you actually think that's going to happen? And it turns out it happens. So Joseph was still in jail during this time. He's taken out. And Joseph is now basically the right-hand man to the Pharaoh. Right-hand man. Second most powerful person in Egypt. Maybe second most powerful person in the entire world at that point. Pretty high point. If he gave up when he was sold into slavery, or thrown in jail, or forgotten about in those 3 years, would he have made it to that same point? Would he? So, why should we be hanging out in this low point in our life, just sitting in this cave, just like, okay, it's comfortable, a little cold, but I'm safe. Why don't we trust God? Because God knows more than us, right? God knows that, hey, this journey up, it may look steep, it may look like you might fall and you might hurt, which you might. Pretty sure I did trip on the way up that hike, by the way. I think I skinned my knee. But, so walking up, skinned my knee, right? But once you get to that mountaintop, the view will be amazing. In this main point, I want you to take out of it is that growth is going to hurt. We're going to fall. We're going to hurt ourselves. We're going to metaphorically skin our knee. We're going to mess up. But there's no getting around that. But you can either try to get through it and grow little by little by yourself, keeping falling, staying in your safe place and reaching out a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit all around. Or you can trust God. And yes, you're going to still fall while trying to follow God because we're humans. We're not perfect. Hate to be the bearer of bad news for anybody that thought they were perfect. You're not, but we still love you. So, back to what I was saying. If we follow God, yes, we're going to fall, but it's going to be a lot easier because God's going to be like, if you step there, it's not as stable as you step here. So step here, and you're more safe. And then you're like, but I like that spot, so I'm going to step there. But God's like, no, step here. So you step there, and you fall a little bit. So you're still going to fall, but you're going to be able to get a safer path up, and growth won't be as painful as if you're trying to do it yourself. Because everybody knows when you try to do it your way, it doesn't work. If you try to do it God's way, it does work. So, going back to my first point, what was the 1 point? Does anybody remember the 1 point? Good job. That's what I got for you guys today.